The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the Valkyrie, but Jake Morrison knew better. He had been staring at the report for 10 minutes now, reading the same words over and over. 3,000 people were dead. The colony of New Haven was gone, burned to ash by Zelthian warships. Men, women, and children had died screaming while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Jake crushed the data pad in his hand. The plastic cracked under the pressure. He was a commander in the Earth Defense Force, trained to stay calm under pressure. But this was different. This was the 4th human colony attacked in 6 months. Each time, the Galactic Council sent their condolences and did nothing else. Each time, humanity was told to be patient, to wait for justice that would never come. Across the solar system, Lisa Martinez read the same report on her ship, the Warhammer. She had been a captain for 8 years, fighting pirates and defending trade routes. She had always followed the rules, always believed that diplomacy would win in the end, but her hands were shaking as she looked at the images from New Haven. Bodies in the streets, homes reduced to rubble, a school that had been hit directly, leaving nothing but a crater. Lisa walked to her window and looked out at Earth. The blue planet hung in space like a jewel, beautiful and deadly. Earth was classified as a death world by the galactic community. Most aliens needed special suits just to breathe the air. The gravity would crush their bones. The diseases would kill them in days. Humans had evolved in hell, and it showed in everything they did. For 20 years, humans had tried to fit in. They joined the Galactic Council and paid huge taxes. They accepted trade deals that were completely unfair. They watched as their colony ships were turned away from good planets, forced to settle on rocks that nobody else wanted. They took the insults, the discrimination, the violence. They stayed quiet because they thought it was the right thing to do. Admiral Patrick O'Brien sat in his office on Earth, surrounded by reports from across human space. Every single one told the same story. The Zelthian Compact, the Vraxian Empire, and the Korthan League had formed an alliance. Their goal was simple: push humanity back to Earth or wipe them out completely. They were tired of sharing the galaxy with Deathworlders. They wanted humans gone. Patrick was 60 years old and had spent his whole life in service. He had fought in the colony wars, survived the plague of 2389, and helped build humanity's first fleet of deep space vessels. He believed in peace. He believed in cooperation. But he also believed in survival, and right now, humanity's survival was at stake. He called a meeting with the top military commanders. General Amanda Foster arrived first, carrying files marked classified. She had been running intelligence operations for years, and her network of spies had confirmed the worst. The Alien Alliance was planning a major attack on Earth's outer colonies. They wanted to cut humanity off from resources and force a surrender. Amanda laid out maps and data across the table. She showed patrol routes, supply lines, and military bases. The aliens thought they were clever, but humans had been watching them too. Humans knew where every ship was stationed, where every weapon was stored, where every commander slept at night. Ryan Blake was the youngest person in the room, only 32 years old. He was a lieutenant commander and a tactical genius. He had studied every major battle in galactic history and knew how each species fought. The Zelthians relied on heavy shields and slow, powerful weapons. The Vraxians used swarm tactics with hundreds of small fighters. The Korthans preferred long-range bombardment and never got close to their enemies. Ryan looked at the data and felt sick. If this attack happened, millions of humans would die. The colonies couldn't defend themselves against this kind of force. Earth's fleet was strong, but it was spread thin across dozens of systems. By the time reinforcements arrived, the colonies would be gone. Patrick looked around the table at his officers. He saw anger in their eyes, but also determination. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. They had families on those colonies. They had friends who might already be dead. Sophie Grant was there too, an engineer who had been working on new weapon systems. She was quiet most of the time, but when she spoke, people listened. She had designed the stealth torpedoes that could slip past any defense system. She had created armor that could absorb energy weapons. She had built engines that made human ships faster than anything else in space. Sophie cleared her throat and everyone looked at her. She pulled up a hologram showing a new type of weapon. It was called the Ragnarok Protocol, and it was specifically designed to counter each alien species. She had kinetic impactors that could punch through Zelthian shields like paper. She had electromagnetic pulses that would fry Vraxian electronics. She had biological agents that would paralyze Korthans without killing them. The room went silent. These weapons were terrifying, but they might be necessary. Patrick stood up and walked to the window. He could see the moon in the distance and beyond it, the stars where human colonies struggled to survive. He thought about his daughter, who lived on one of those colonies with her family. He thought about all the children who played in parks and went to school and dreamed about the future. He turned back to his officers and his voice was hard as steel. The aliens thought humans were weak because they had been patient. They thought humans were afraid because they had avoided war. But patience was not weakness, and avoiding war was not the same as being unable to fight. Patrick gave the order that would change everything. Every human ship would prepare for combat. Every colony would arm itself. Every soldier would get ready for war. Humanity had tried peace for 20 years. Now they would try something else. Jake Morrison received his orders within the hour. He was to take his squadron and hit the Zelthian supply depot at Chronos Station. Complete destruction. No survivors unless they surrendered. He gathered his pilots and told them what was coming. Some of them looked scared, but most looked relieved. Finally, they could fight back. Lisa Martinez got her orders too. She was to take the Warhammer into Vraxian space and destroy their communication relays, cut them off from their fleet, make them blind and deaf. She smiled for the first time in days. The Vraxians had been calling for human extinction for years. Now they would learn what extinction felt like. Across human space, the message spread. The Deathworlders were done being victims. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was the most dangerous planet in known space. The creatures that had evolved there were not just survivors. They were predators. And they were angry. The attack on Chronos Station happened at 400 hours, when the Zelthian guards were at their sleepiest. Jake Morrison led 12 fighters through the darkness of space, their engines running silent and their weapons hot. The station hung before them like a fat target, completely unaware of what was coming. Jake had fought pirates before, but this was different. This was war, and he felt no hesitation as he gave the order to fire. The first missiles hit the station's shield generators, overloading them in seconds. The second wave targeted the docking bays, trapping the Zelthian ships inside. The third wave went for the ammunition storage, and when those exploded, the entire station shook. The Zelthians scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Their ships were designed for slow, methodical warfare. They expected enemies to announce themselves, to follow rules, to fight fair. Humans did none of those things. Jake's squadron moved like sharks, hitting hard and moving before the defenders could aim. Within 30 minutes, Chronos Station was a burning wreck, and Jake's team was gone, vanishing into the black. On the other side of the galaxy, Lisa Martinez was executing her own mission. The Warhammer dropped out of faster-than-light travel right next to a Vraxian communication relay. Before the aliens could even send a distress signal, Lisa's weapons officer fired. The relay exploded into a million pieces, its debris spreading across space like confetti. Lisa checked her star map. There were 47 more relays in this sector, and she planned to destroy every single one. The Vraxians had been loud about their hatred of humans, broadcasting their propaganda across every channel. Now they would go silent, and the silence would terrify them more than any weapon. Her crew worked like a machine, each person knowing their job perfectly. The navigator plotted jumps that kept them ahead of Vraxian patrols. The engineer kept the engines running at maximum efficiency. The weapons officer never missed a shot. They were human, and humans were good at war. Sophie Grant watched from Earth as her torpedoes launched toward Korthan space. She had spent years designing these weapons, making them invisible to every known sensor. The Korthans thought their core worlds were safe behind layers of defense platforms and patrol fleets. They were wrong. The torpedoes moved through space like ghosts, passing detection grids without triggering alarms. They slipped between patrol routes and avoided sensor sweeps. When they finally reached the Korthan shipyards, they detonated all at once. 12 orbital construction facilities exploded, taking with them the ships that were being built and the workers who built them. Sophie felt a moment of regret for the workers. But then she remembered New Haven. She remembered the children who died there. War was ugly, but humans had not started this fight. They were just going to finish it. Admiral Patrick O'Brien watched everything from his command center on Earth. Holographic displays showed him the entire battlefield, red markers spreading across the map like blood and water. Every marker was a human victory. Every marker was a message to the galaxy. Leave humans alone. Reports came in from across space. A Zelthian patrol fleet had been ambushed and destroyed. A Vraxian supply convoy had been captured. A Corthan listening post had gone dark. The aliens were panicking, sending confused messages to each other, trying to understand what was happening. Patrick allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had studied human history, but they had learned the wrong lessons. They saw the wars humans fought against each other and thought humans were primitive and violent. They did not understand that those wars had taught humans how to fight better than any other species. Humans knew strategy, tactics, and the importance of speed and surprise. Henry Walker led his ground forces to New Haven, the colony that had started this war. His soldiers landed in dropships, hitting the ground hard and fast. The Zelthian garrison there had been celebrating their victory, drinking and laughing about the humans they had killed. They never expected the humans to come back. Henry's troops moved through the ruins with cold efficiency. They knew this ground because they had lived here. Every street, every building, every hiding spot was familiar. The Zelthians were lost in a maze, but humans were home. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Zelthians tried to surrender after the first hour, but Henry made them wait. He wanted them to feel afraid. He wanted them to understand what it was like to be helpless. When he finally accepted their surrender, he made sure every single one of them saw the bodies of the colonists they had killed. Henry looked at the Zelthian commander, a tall alien with purple skin and too many eyes. The alien was shaking, probably expecting to be executed. Henry thought about it for a long moment, then shook his head. Humans were not monsters, even when they fought monsters. He ordered his troops to take the prisoners and treat them fairly. They would face trial for their crimes, but they would not be murdered. That was the difference between humans and their enemies. Humans could be brutal in war, but they never lost their humanity. Jake Morrison's squadron had become famous across human space. Other ships joined him, forming a battle group that struck fear into every Zelthian heart. They hit military bases, destroyed supply depots, and captured enemy officers. Jake made sure to broadcast everything, showing the galaxy that humans were not the victims anymore. One of the captured Zelthian admirals was forced to make a recording. Jake stood behind the camera as the admiral confessed that his government had planned the New Haven massacre. It was not an accident or a rogue action. It was official policy, the first step in a plan to wipe out humanity. The recording spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had been neutral suddenly became sympathetic to humanity. Even some Zelthians were horrified, realizing that their leaders had dragged them into a war of extinction. Lisa Martinez achieved something that military historians said was impossible. She captured a Vraxian dreadnought, one of the massive warships that served as the backbone of their fleet. The ship was called the Conqueror, and it had destroyed 3 human colonies over the past year. Lisa had studied the ship's design for weeks, looking for weaknesses. She found one in the power distribution system. A precise hit in the right spot would disable the entire ship without destroying it. She made the shot herself, and it was perfect. The Vraxian crew surrendered immediately when they realized they were helpless. Lisa boarded the ship with her Marines and walked through its corridors. The Vraxians cowered before her, these aliens who had seemed so powerful and now looked so small. She renamed the ship Liberty and put a human crew on it. The sight of a Vraxian dreadnought flying human colors was a propaganda victory worth more than a dozen battles. It told everyone that humans could not just fight, they could win completely. Amanda Foster revealed more of her secret weapons as the war continued. She had been preparing for this conflict for years, building tools specifically designed to counter each alien species. Some were lethal, some were not, but all were effective. The galaxy watched in shock as human forces crushed everything in their path. The Zelthian Compact was in full retreat, pulling back to defend their homeworld. The Vraxian Empire recalled its fleets from across the galaxy. The Corthan League started sending peace offers that were immediately rejected. Smaller species that had joined the alliance out of fear now scrambled to switch sides. Nobody wanted to be on the losing team, and it was obvious who was losing. Humans had gone from victims to victors in a matter of weeks. Patrick O'Brien read the reports and felt no joy. War was necessary, but it was not something to celebrate. Every human victory meant someone died, and death was always tragic. But he also knew that sometimes war was the only option. Sometimes peace could only be achieved through strength. The galaxy had forced humanity into this corner. Now humanity was fighting its way out, and nothing would stop them until justice was served. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Delegates from 200 species shouted at each other, their translation devices creating a symphony of angry voices. Ambassador Krell of the Zelthian Compact stood at the center podium, his crest flushed dark purple with rage and fear. He slammed his six-fingered hand on the podium and demanded silence. When the chamber quieted, his voice echoed through the vast space. The humans had gone insane, he declared. They were attacking everything without mercy. Military bases, supply lines, communication networks, even civilian infrastructure. They had to be stopped before they destroyed the entire galaxy. Nicole Perry sat in the human delegation area, listening calmly. She was Earth's ambassador to the Council, and she had been preparing for this moment for weeks. She wore a simple blue suit and had her hair tied back in a professional style. She looked harmless, like a school teacher or a librarian. The other delegates had learned not to underestimate her. When Krell finished his speech, Nicole stood slowly. She did not rush to the podium or raise her voice. She simply walked forward with quiet confidence, and somehow that was more intimidating than any display of anger. She looked directly at Krell and asked him to explain what he meant by civilian targets. Was he talking about places like New Haven, where Zelthian warships had murdered 3,000 colonists? Was he referring to Port Liberty, where Vraxian soldiers had executed every human they could find? Or perhaps he meant Sanctuary Station, where Korthan forces had deliberately targeted refugee ships full of children. The chamber went silent. Krell's crest faded to a sickly gray color. Other delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Nicole continued speaking, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. For 6 months, she explained, human colonies had been systematically attacked. Not by pirates or criminals, but by official military forces of Council member states. Earth had brought evidence to the Council repeatedly. Each time they were told to be patient. Each time they were offered sympathy but no action. Each time the attacks continued. Nicole pulled up holographic images that filled the chamber. Bodies in the streets of New Haven, burned homes on Port Liberty, children's toys floating in space near the destroyed refugee ships. The images were horrific and several delegates looked away. She asked the Council a simple question. What was humanity supposed to do? Should they wait patiently while their people were slaughtered? Should they trust in a council that had done nothing to protect them? Should they accept extinction quietly? Ambassador Krell tried to interrupt, but Nicole cut him off. She played the recording of the captured Zelthian admiral, the one who had confessed to the planned genocide. His words were clear and damning. The Zelthian government had wanted to eliminate humanity completely, to wipe them from the galaxy as if they had never existed. The chamber erupted in arguments again. Some species demanded that Earth be punished for their military actions. Others said humanity had every right to defend themselves. The Mirian Collective, a group of small, peaceful species, stood up and declared their support for Earth. They had also suffered under the larger powers and understood what it meant to be helpless. The Task and Unity joined them, followed by the Free Traders Guild. Within hours, a third of the Council had sided with humanity. The carefully constructed alliance against Earth was falling apart. Jake Morrison's battle group continued its campaign while the politicians argued. His orders were clear. Hit the Zelthians hard and keep hitting them until they surrendered. He led his ships deep into Zelthian space, targeting military installations and forcing their fleet to retreat. At one point, Jake's forces encountered a Zelthian hospital ship. His weapons officer asked if they should destroy it, since it was technically a valid military target. Jake said no immediately. Humans did not attack hospitals, period. They escorted the ship to neutral space and let it go. The gesture was small, but it spread across the galaxy quickly. Even in war, humans maintained their ethics. They were brutal to military targets but spared civilians whenever possible. It was a sharp contrast to what the Zelthians had done to New Haven. Lisa Martinez and her captured dreadnought Liberty became symbols of human victory. She took the ship on a tour of human colonies, letting people see proof that their enemies could be defeated. Everywhere she went, crowds gathered to cheer. Children pointed at the massive warship and dreamed of joining the fleet. But Lisa also used Liberty for humanitarian missions. When a neutral colony was hit by a natural disaster, She diverted her ship to help with rescue operations. When refugees needed transport to safety, Liberty carried them. The Vraxians had built the ship to destroy, but humans used it to save lives. Amanda Foster continued revealing the weapons humanity had prepared. Each new system was more impressive than the last. She showed the Council representatives exactly what would happen if any species tried to attack Earth directly. The demonstrations were terrifying, showing weapons that could crack planets or turn stars unstable. The message was clear. Humanity had the power to destroy civilizations if they wanted to. They chose not to use that power, but the choice was theirs to make. Any species that threatened human extinction would face extinction themselves. Ryan Blake worked with the intelligence teams to track down war criminals. He compiled lists of officers and officials who had ordered attacks on human civilians. Some of these people tried to hide, but human agents found them. They were arrested and brought to trial, facing justice for their crimes. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy. Humans could have executed the prisoners or thrown them in dark holes to be forgotten. Instead, they gave them fair trials with lawyers and evidence. They proved that even enemies deserved justice, not revenge. Henry Walker and his ground forces had liberated 6 colonies by now. Each time they found Zelthian or Vraxian garrisons that had been abusing the local populations. Each time Walker's troops showed restraint, accepting surrenders and protecting prisoners. One Zelthian soldier asked Walker why humans bothered with mercy. They could just kill everyone and be done with it. Walker explained that humans fought for freedom and justice, not extermination. If they became monsters to fight monsters, they would lose what made them worth fighting for. The Corthan League was the first to break. Their Council of Elders sent a formal peace offer to Earth, agreeing to all human demands. They would pay reparations, withdraw from all disputed territories, and hand over their war criminals. They just wanted the war to stop. Patrick O'Brien reviewed the offer with his advisors. Some wanted to reject it and keep fighting until the Corthans were completely destroyed. Patrick disagreed. The goal was never to destroy entire civilizations. The goal was to make humanity safe. He accepted the Corthan surrender with conditions. They would be watched closely, and any violation of the peace would result in immediate military action. But if they honored their word, humanity would honor theirs. The Vraxian Empire was next. Their emperor, a proud creature who had ruled for 200 years, sent a personal message to Patrick. He admitted that the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had seen humans as primitive animals and learned too late that they were dealing with apex predators. The Emperor offered to abdicate if it would bring peace. Patrick told him that was not necessary. Humanity did not want to rule other species or reshape their governments. They just wanted respect and the right to exist. The Zelthian Compact held out the longest. Ambassador Krell still believed that the Council would eventually support them. He gave speech after speech about human aggression and the danger they posed. But fewer delegates listened each time. Finally, Jake Morrison led his battle group to the Zelthian homeworld. He did not attack the planet. Instead, he established a blockade. No ships would enter or leave until the Compact agreed to peace terms. The Zelthians raged and threatened, but Jake's forces held firm. Without trade or supply ships, the Zelthian economy started to collapse within days. Their people began protesting in the streets, demanding that their leaders end the war. After 2 weeks of blockade, the Compact government fell in a peaceful revolution. The new government immediately reached out to Earth for peace. Nicole Perry stood before the Council one more time. She announced that humanity was withdrawing from the Galactic Council permanently. The Council had failed in its purpose and humans would not be part of a corrupt system any longer. Instead, she proposed something new. A coalition of free worlds where every species had an equal voice regardless of size or power, where decisions were made by consensus rather than domination, where justice mattered more than politics. Dozens of species signed up immediately. The old council was dead and something better was being born in its place. The war had lasted 3 months, but it felt like years. Patrick O'Brien stood in his command center, looking at the tactical display that showed the entire galaxy. The red markers that represented enemy forces were clustered around their homeworlds now, defensive and afraid. The blue markers of human ships spread across the map like a net, not attacking but watching, waiting. The Zelthian Compact was broken. The Vraxian Empire was retreating, The Korthan League had already surrendered. Smaller species that had joined the alliance were scrambling to make peace. The war that was supposed to eliminate humanity had instead shattered their enemies completely. But Patrick knew that winning the war was only the first step. Making peace would be harder. Humanity had proven they could fight, but now they needed to prove they could show mercy. The galaxy was watching to see what kind of species humans really were. Jake Morrison maintained his blockade around the Zelthian homeworld. His ships formed a perfect sphere around the planet, preventing anything from entering or leaving. Supply ships that tried to break through were turned away. Warships that approached were warned once and then disabled if they continued. Inside the blockade, the Zelthian people were suffering, not from human attacks, but from their own government's failures. For generations, the Compact had imported most of their food and resources, using their military might to secure favorable trade deals. Now those trade routes were cut and the planet could not feed itself. Jake received daily messages from the Zelthian government. Some were threats, promising revenge for this humiliation. Others were pleas, begging him to let humanitarian supplies through. Jake allowed medical supplies and basic food to pass, but nothing that could help the military. A young Zelthian pilot tried to break the blockade in a small fighter, probably hoping to be a hero. Jake's interceptors caught the ship easily and brought it back to the planet undamaged. The pilot was released with a message. Humans were not the enemy, the Zelthian government was. Lisa Martinez commanded a similar blockade around the main Vraxian military base. The Liberty floated in space like a symbol of everything the Vraxians had lost. Their own greatest warship, now flying human colors and forcing a human blockade. The psychological impact was devastating. The Vraxian Emperor sent her a message every day. Sometimes he raged about honor and dignity. Sometimes he tried to negotiate. Sometimes he just seemed tired and sad. Lisa listened to all of it but never changed her orders. The blockade would continue until the Emperor signed a formal surrender. She did allow Vraxian civilian ships to pass freely. Merchant vessels, passenger, liners, and transport ships were all inspected and released. Lisa made sure her crews were professional and courteous during inspections. She wanted the Vraxian people to see that humans were not monsters. Nicole Perry worked 20 hours a day on the peace negotiations. She met with ambassadors from dozens of species, listening to their concerns and explaining humanity's position. Some negotiations were easy. Some required days of careful discussion. Some species wanted to join the new coalition immediately. Others needed time to convince their governments. The hardest conversations were with species that had been allies of the Zelthians or Vraxians. They were afraid of human revenge, worried that humanity would treat them the way they had treated humans. Nicole assured them that the coalition would be different. It would be based on equality and justice, not power and fear. Ryan Blake helped Nicole draft the treaty documents. He worked with legal experts from Earth and representatives from alien species to create something fair. The terms were harsh for those who had attacked humanity, but they were not cruel. Reparations would be paid, but not so much that it would destroy their economies. War criminals would face trial, but their entire species would not be punished. The key innovation was the concept of transitional justice. Species that had committed crimes could earn forgiveness by helping rebuild what they had destroyed. Zelthians who had attacked New Haven would help rebuild the colony. Vraxians who had killed refugees would work in refugee centers. It was justice that healed rather than destroyed. Sophie Grant shifted her focus from weapons to reconstruction. The genius that had created the Ragnarok Protocol now designed systems to rebuild shattered worlds. She developed rapid construction techniques, water purification systems, and agricultural methods that could turn barren planets into thriving colonies. She worked with engineers from other species, sharing human technology freely. Some of her alien colleagues were amazed by human ingenuity. Others were humbled, realizing that the Deathworlders had always been more advanced than anyone admitted. Sophie formed a special team to handle the most dangerous task, dismantling the Ragnarok weapons. These systems were too dangerous to leave active, but destroying them completely seemed foolish. Instead, She designed secure storage facilities, deep underground on Earth, guarded by the best security humanity could create. The weapons would sleep, available only if humanity faced extinction again. Henry Walker's ground forces became peacekeepers across liberated colonies. His soldiers worked alongside former enemies, teaching them how to rebuild and protect their communities. It was strange to see Zelthian soldiers working with human troops, but it happened more often every day. One of Walker's sergeants, a woman named Kate Murphy, became famous for her work with refugees. She organized shelter construction, food distribution, and medical care for thousands of displaced people. Many of them were not human, but Kate treated everyone the same. She believed that peace required compassion, not just treaties. Walker watched his soldiers adapt to their new role. Some struggled with the transition from warriors to guardians. They had lost friends in the war and found it hard to work alongside aliens. Walker spent hours talking with them, helping them understand that vengeance was not the same as justice. The breakthrough came when the Mirian Collective proposed the Coalition of Free Worlds officially. They had been planning it for weeks with human advisors, creating a structure that would prevent any single species from dominating. Every member would have one vote, regardless of their size or military power. Decisions required a 2/3 majority, ensuring that only broadly supported actions could be taken. The coalition would have no standing army. Instead, member species would contribute to a defense force that could only be activated if a member was attacked. The force would be commanded by officers from multiple species, preventing any single government from using it for conquest. Patrick reviewed the proposal and smiled. It was exactly what humanity had wanted. A galaxy where strength did not equal authority, where small species had the same voice as large ones, where cooperation replaced domination. Ambassador Krell, the Zelthian who had opposed humanity so fiercely, requested a private meeting with Nicole. She agreed, curious about what he wanted. They met in a neutral space station, just the two of them in a small conference room. Krell looked different from the proud warrior she had argued with in the council. He seemed smaller somehow, defeated. He told her that his government had fallen. The new Zelthian leadership wanted peace and was willing to accept any terms Earth demanded. Nicole asked him why he had hated humans so much. Krell was quiet for a long time before answering. He admitted that it was fear. The Zelthians had ruled their sector for 1,000 years, and humans threatened that dominance. Rather than adapting, they had tried to eliminate the threat. He asked Nicole if humans planned to replace the Zelthians as the dominant power. She laughed and said no. Humanity did not want to rule anyone. They just wanted to live in peace and explore the stars. If the Zelthians wanted to be partners in that vision, humans would welcome them. Krell looked at her with his multiple eyes and said something that would be quoted across the galaxy. The galaxy had feared humans before the war because of their strength. Now they feared humans because of their mercy. A species that could destroy civilizations but chose not to was more terrifying than any weapon. Jake received word that the new Zelthian government was ready to negotiate. He ended the blockade immediately, allowing trade ships to return. The planet below celebrated and Jake's ships withdrew to a safe distance. The war with the Zelthians was over. Lisa got similar news from the Vraxian Emperor. He agreed to a complete surrender, accepting all human terms without argument. The liberty would remain in human hands as a symbol of the new peace. Lisa transferred command of the blockade to another officer and began the journey home to Earth. One by one, the pieces fell into place. The Korthan League formalized their surrender. Dozens of smaller species joined the coalition. Former enemies became neutral, then friendly, then allies. The galaxy that had been at war was becoming a galaxy at peace. Patrick gathered his senior officers for a final meeting. He thanked them for their service and told them that the hard part was beginning. Fighting a war was simple compared to building a lasting peace. But he believed in humanity, and he believed in the good people of other species who wanted something better. The Treaty of Titan was scheduled to be signed in 1 month. Representatives from every major species would gather on Saturn's largest moon to officially end the war and create the coalition. It would be the most important diplomatic event in galactic history. The signing ceremony took place in a specially constructed hall on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The building was made of transparent aluminum, allowing everyone inside to see the ringed giant hanging in the black sky. Representatives from 147 species gathered in the hall, more than had ever assembled for any purpose in galactic history. Patrick O'Brien stood at the front of the hall in his formal uniform, medals covering his chest. Beside him were the leaders of the Zelthian Compact, the Vraxian Empire, and the Korthan League. All of them looked uncomfortable, but they were there. That was what mattered. The Treaty of Titan was 300 pages long, covering everything from reparations to trade agreements to mutual defense pacts. But the core was simple. The war was over. All species agreed to respect each other's sovereignty. The Galactic Council was dissolved. The coalition of free worlds would take its place. Each leader signed the treaty in their own way. The Zelthians used a crest stamp. The Vraxians made a claw mark. The Korthans pressed their tentacles into bioreactive ink. Patrick signed with an old-fashioned pen that had belonged to his grandfather. When the last signature was added, the hall erupted in applause. Not everyone was happy about the treaty. Some thought humans got too much. Others thought the aliens got off too easily. But everyone agreed that peace was better than war. Patrick gave a short speech after the signing. He talked about the cost of war and the value of peace. He honored those who had died and promised that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. He looked at the alien leaders and said that humanity bore no grudges. The past was done. The future was what mattered now. After the ceremony, Patrick submitted his resignation. He had served for 40 years and felt that it was time for younger people to lead. The government tried to convince him to stay, but his mind was made up. He wanted to spend his remaining years with his family, watching his grandchildren grow up in a galaxy at peace. Jake Morrison received a promotion to captain and was given command of a new ship called the Endeavor. His orders were to explore beyond the known galaxy, to seek out new species and new worlds. The war had proven humanity's strength. Now it was time to prove their character. Jake stood on the bridge of the Endeavor looking at his crew. They were young and eager, ready for adventure. Some of them had fought in the war, but most had not. They represented the future, a generation that would grow up knowing peace instead of conflict. His first officer was a Zelthian named Krev, one of the soldiers who had defected during the war. Krev had been horrified by his government's actions and had helped human forces several times. Jake had requested him specifically, wanting to show that humans could work with anyone willing to try. Lisa Martinez became the first human admiral of the Coalition Defense Force. It was a position that did not exist before the treaty, created specifically to coordinate military efforts across species. She worked from a space station that orbited a neutral planet, commanding officers from dozens of different worlds. The Liberty remained her flagship, a constant reminder of where the Coalition had come from. But Lisa also had ships from other species under her command. Zelthian cruisers, Vraxian fighters, Korthan carriers, all working together. It was strange at first, but the crews adapted quickly. Lisa created a new training program that mixed personnel from different species. Human soldiers trained alongside Zelthian warriors. Vraxian pilots flew in formation with human interceptors. The goal was to build understanding and trust, turning former enemies into comrades. Amanda Foster took charge of demilitarizing humanity's most dangerous weapons. The Ragnarok protocol systems were sealed in deep storage, their locations known only to a handful of people. The access codes required authorization from the President, the Defense Minister, and 3 senior military officers. The weapons would only be used if humanity faced extinction again. But Amanda also worked on new technologies, peaceful ones. She helped design the Coalition's communication network, linking all member worlds with instant messaging. She developed medical technologies that saved lives across species. Her genius, once focused on destruction, now created hope. Sophie Grant continued her work rebuilding destroyed colonies. New Haven was her personal project, a chance to create something beautiful from tragedy. She designed buildings that could withstand any attack, agriculture systems that could feed millions, and shield generators that would protect the colonists. When New Haven was finished, it was more than a colony. It was a memorial, a promise that humanity would never forget what happened there. At the center of the colony stood a monument listing every person who had died in the massacre. Sophie attended the dedication ceremony and cried for the first time since the war began. Henry Walker retired from the military to become a civilian administrator. He was put in charge of refugee resettlement, helping people who had been displaced by the war find new homes. It was difficult work, but Walker approached it with the same determination he had shown in combat. He worked with volunteers from every species, people who wanted to help rebuild what the war had destroyed. They built homes, schools, hospitals, and spaceports. They created communities where humans and aliens lived side by side, proving that cooperation was possible. One of Walker's assistants was a young Vraxian named Vex, who had lost her family in the war. She blamed humans at first, but Walker showed her that hatred only created more pain. Eventually, Vex became one of his most dedicated helpers, working tirelessly to help refugees from all species. Nicole Perry became Earth's first Secretary of Interspecies Affairs, a cabinet-level position created specifically for her. She worked from the new Coalition headquarters, a massive space station that orbited the sun of a neutral system. Representatives from every member species had offices there, creating a true center of galactic government. Nicole spent her days in meetings, resolving disputes and building alliances. Some conflicts were small, like trade disagreements or border questions. Others were more serious, requiring careful diplomacy to prevent violence. But every problem was solved through talking, not fighting. She became known across the galaxy as the woman who tamed the Deathworlders. Nicole hated the nickname, but it stuck. People felt safe knowing that she was watching over things, making sure that humanity's power was used wisely. Ryan Blake was promoted to full commander and became Nicole's chief military advisor. He helped design the Coalition Defense Force's strategic doctrines, ensuring that military power would only be used for protection, never conquest. His tactical genius, once focused on destroying enemies, now prevented conflicts before they started. Kate Murphy, Henry Walker's sergeant, started a charity that helped war orphans across the galaxy. She worked with children from dozens of species, providing education, shelter, and emotional support. Many of these children had lost their families to the war, and Kate made sure they knew they were not alone. The charity grew rapidly, funded by donations from across the Coalition. Even former enemies contributed, wanting to help heal the wounds of war. Within a year, Kate's organization was operating on 50 worlds, helping thousands of children build new lives. 6 months after the treaty signing, Patrick visited New Haven with his family. His daughter lived there with her husband and 3 children, and Patrick wanted to see what Sophie had built. The colony was beautiful, clean and modern, with parks and playgrounds everywhere. Patrick's grandchildren ran through the streets, playing with human and alien children together. They did not care about species or history. They just cared about having fun. Patrick watched them and smiled, knowing that this was what the war had been fought for. Ambassador Krell came to Earth for the first time, invited by Nicole to speak at a peace conference. He stood before an audience of humans and aliens, admitting his mistakes and asking for forgiveness. Many in the audience were skeptical, but they listened. Krell talked about how fear had driven his people to terrible actions. He explained that the Zelthians had been so afraid of losing their power that they became the monsters they feared. But the war had taught them that true strength came from cooperation, not domination. At the end of his speech, Krell did something no Zelthian leader had ever done. He bowed to the human flag, a gesture of deep respect in his culture. The audience stood and applauded, and Nicole felt tears in her eyes. The coalition grew stronger every month. New species joined regularly, attracted by the promise of equality and justice. Trade flourished between worlds that had once been enemies. Scientific cooperation led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone. But the coalition also faced challenges. Some species still distrusted humans. Some humans still hated aliens. Pirates and criminals took advantage of the new peace to operate more boldly. The Coalition Defense Force had to respond to dozens of incidents every month. Jake's exploration missions discovered 3 new intelligent species in the first year. Each time Jake approached with caution and respect, remembering how badly first contact had gone between humans and the old Galactic Council. 2 of the new species joined the coalition immediately. The third asked for time to consider, and Jake respected their decision. Lisa's defense force stopped 2 attempted invasions from species outside coalition space. Both times, the combined fleet of multiple,